Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sara Newman, and I'm so happy you're joining me for this episode of Saturday with Sara. Today we're playing with the Create Happiness collection from our friends at Stamperia, which includes 2 really versatile stencils, plus floral-inspired rub-ons and a pack of coordinating ephemera. Now the other item that I love is this little mixed media journal. So we're going to have a lot of fun combining these elements today. Now I'm also going to use a few other items, including pattern papers from Hot Off the Press's Window View collection. And these just work so beautifully in coordination with the kind of watercolor effect of the rub-ons and that beautiful ephemera pack. We'll also be using some dazzles from the Good Times at Dazzles collection. I've got some embossing powder, and I'm also going to add in a bit of sparkle with clear glitter sheets. So as you can see, we have a lot to explore today, and I'm so glad that you're here. Come play with us. Let's start with this card, and we can talk about the ephemera and do some rub-ons and a little bit of stenciling too. So here I've covered my card front with that patterned paper, and then I inked around the outside edges using the roasted coffee ink pad. Now I know you guys have seen me demo this before, but just in case you haven't, to get that brown edge going around there, all you need to do is just take your ink pad and hold it along the edge of your card and just run that right along there. Of course, the more you tilt your ink pad toward the front of your card or your paper, the heavier that application will be. You'll get a lighter, crisper edge if you just go really perpendicular to that edge there. Super simple to do and a great way to get a really nice defined look on here. Now, I love this large focal ephemera image here of the open book. I have to say that was the first piece that I pulled out. Really wanted to put that to use. It's a lot of fun to use just as it is or to embellish. And so I've added a floral ephemera here and a couple of leaves. I've also got some butterflies on here. Now the flower and the leaves are glued just straight down onto the card front, and the butterflies are popped up with some foam tape for a little bit of dimension. Now this little bit of foliage that you see here is a rub-on. So let's take a look at how to use these. Now you've got a pack that will look like this. You've got a lot of really beautiful images on here. They're super simple to use. So in fact, you've also got instructions on the back in lots of languages and a little visual down here too. Could not be easier to do, but let me show you how. Okay, I'll move these aside and bring in a piece of cardstock and one of the images. So your rub-on sheet will have this clear plastic on here, and then there will be a backing sheet on there. So when you trim these out from your main sheet of rub-ons, snip them out together, just using a pair of scissors. And then what you'll do is gently separate the two. When you do this, be sure that you're not handling any of that printed area on there. Okay, and then just pop this down onto whatever surface you're going to adhere it to. And these are pretty easy to rub on. In fact, if you burnish this with your finger, you'll be about halfway there. And then what I like to do is take a bone folder and just gently burnish this to transfer the image onto your cardstock or your paper surface. Really gently, and then gently and slowly pull back this plastic piece. And you want to do it slowly because if you notice that there's any part on there that has not transferred, you can simply place this back down, go back with your bone folder, and add a little bit more pressure. So gives you a second chance or a third chance if you need one. And then just pull this off. And there you go. You've got your beautiful image on here. Could not be easier to do. So that's what I've done to add this little touch of green that you see on here. And I really love being able to integrate some of the foliage on that rub-on sheet with the rest of the ephemera elements. I think it works together really beautifully. Now at the top here, you're going to see my stenciled border. This is just a strip of pattern paper with that dash pattern on here. I love this design. It's so versatile. And of course, super easy to do as well. So let me bring back in a piece of white cardstock. That's what I'm working with here. and I'll bring in the border stencil. Now what I really like about this is you've got lots of borders, really versatile, really easy to use. You've also got this really cool kind of cloud edge on here too. So to get the effect that I had for that card, I just simply placed my stencil on my paper. Now you can mask off elements if you want to. If you only want this one border but nothing else, you can mask that off using scrap paper is what I do, or some of that low tack tape. Then you're going to grab your dye-based ink pad and a blending tool. So lots of us have blending tools. They really come in handy for this kind of thing. And all you need to do is just pick up a little bit of ink. And let's see, I think I'll go for this pattern here. And I'm just gently working through the stencil. Now because this is a dye-based ink pad, it's going to wash off of my stencil really nicely. So no staining here. Okay, so a gentle touch. And kind of like with the Rub On, you want to lift this up. Just double check that you've got the pattern on there as much as you want. If you need to, place it back down and continue on. Now you can also blend in other colors if you want to. So lots of different options with your ink blending. So I'm using the Prism dye-based inks for this. Super simple to do, as I mentioned, and a lot of fun, and a great way to just add a nice bit of dimension to your project. So again, this is what I've done up here on this top border. Now, of course, I've also got a Dazzle Sentiment on here. This is again from the Good Times Dazzle pack. And I really like the larger size and how nicely everything balances on here. Then for my card inside, I've got some more of that pattern paper. I've got another different border dazzle from the one on the front of the card, but again, you can see that pretty vine effect. And I have some floral ephemera along with another dazzle and a little butterfly accent. This card also features a rub-on, but as the card focal, and there are plenty of images on this sheet that work really nicely for this technique. Now here I've used some of the nesting oval dies from Hot Off the Press, and that's really to create a nice foundation and give a little bit more impact to some of these petite images. Now I think you can see on here, maybe as I'm tilting this, that there's some sparkle and shine on that scalloped oval, and then also on the card front itself. And it's a nice subtle effect, which I think works really well with the soft watercolor image of this flower and of course the butterfly ephemera. So my secret to this is the glitter sheet set. Now this is a lot of fun to use. These are sheets of self-adhesive glitter foil, and it's going to give you a really pretty kind of a snow effect, but of course it works nicely no matter what the season is. So let's take a look at this. I've got a little piece that I've just used scissors to cut away from one of the larger sheets. And you can see, just gently peel this back. You can see that gorgeous foil on there. Now with a larger piece, I do recommend that you work in sections because it is self-adhesive and it is pretty sticky. So you don't want to end up with it sticking to itself. So it's really better if you just kind of place one side down and kind of walk the rest of this off until you remove that liner piece, which you can then simply discard. So as you can see, it's easy to adhere onto a surface, and then it's going to give you just a really pretty kind of shimmery look here. So I've applied that glitter sheet to the entire front of my card, and then I trim down my pattern paper. So as you can see, I've also got some shading going around the edges here. Now this is with the coffee ink pad, and this is a really nice and easy technique to do. So let me grab again my blender tool and my ink pad. I'm working onto my craft mat, which is important because I'm going to pick up some ink from the ink pad, working from the craft mat onto the paper. I'm going to go in kind of a gentle swirling motion. And this is just going to sort of softly edge my pattern paper. And the reason I'm working from the craft mat in is so that I don't end up with any sort of rough or really defined edges. So it's nice, soft, and blended. And again, in a gentle circular motion. You can go back and of course add as much as you want to. And then once you've got that, let me bring in once again a piece of white paper and you can see really how that definition is on there, soft and gentle. But of course, work onto your craft mat with this one. It makes it a lot easier. And so that's what I've done here on this piece. I've of course got some of my Dazzles, a little ephemera butterfly and a bow on here. And then for my card inside, I have another little stencil border. Plus I have a corner treatment of the ephemera and one of the Rub Ons on here. And of course a Dazzle to finish it off. I was super excited to get a chance to play with Stamperia's Mixed Media Journal. I absolutely love this. It's fantastic quality for those of us who really appreciate a good journal. Nice sturdy cover, nice sturdy pages, and of course a really handy little size. So this measures about 4¼ by 6 inches, which means that it's something that can easily be tucked inside a bag, or you can do note-taking or art journaling on the go. So what I've done here is embellished this really beautiful soft kind of faux texture pattern design on the cover with our stencil and a little bit of embossing. It's a super simple technique to do and one that works for card making as well as journals. So let's take a look. I'm going to move aside my journals and I'm going to demonstrate just on a piece of white cardstock. I think that might be easier. Got a couple of things on hand. I'm working onto my craft mat, which is really important. I'll be using my heat tool, so I want to make sure I can protect my work surface. I have my postcard stencil. I've also got my Wow embossing ink pad, and I've got my gold embossing powder. Now, what I do recommend when you're doing this technique is to opt for a fine or a detail embossing powder. There are lots of really great kind of chunky or heavily textured embossing powders out there. Save those for another project because as you can see, there's a lot of really fine detail on this stencil and you'll want to have a fine or detail embossing powder to go with that. So this is from Stampendous and it works perfectly. Now the other thing I have on hand, very important, is a folded piece of scrap paper. This is going to collect my embossing powder, my leftover embossing powder, so I can get it back into the jar. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to grab the stencil and I'm just going to pop this down onto my cardstock. Let's see, I'll get this area here. Now if you want to, you can use some low-tack tape to secure this in place. For today, I'm just going to hold on to it though. And I've got my embossing ink pad. All I need to do is just simply take the lid off and press this right onto my stencil. And when I do this, I'm pressing the ink through the stencil onto my cardstock or my journal cover. Okay, so pop the lid back on there. And then very important, I'm not going to slide off the stencil, I'm going to lift it off and then bring in my piece of rescued paper here and just add my embossing powder right on top. And then I can tap off any excess on here. And there you can see where that embossing powder has stuck onto the embossing ink. Now if you're finding that there are some little areas here where you've got more embossing powder than you want, I just recommend that you keep on hand a small fine tip dry paintbrush. And you can kind of use that to sort of shimmy away any of your stray granules of embossing powder. And then you're ready to heat set. So I'm going to pop this here. I'm going to funnel my embossing powder back into the jar because of course you don't want to waste a single bit of it. This is an important step. Be sure to put the lid back on before you turn on your embossing tool, otherwise that can go lots of different directions. Okay, so I'm going to place this here on my heat resistant surface, come in with my heat tool and just melt that embossing powder. Okay, and I think you can see where this beautiful design is nice and shimmery golden. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And again, so easy to do. Now you can do this on your card front as well as your journal cover. So it's a great technique to kind of have on hand if you like working with your embossing powders. So let's take another look at the journal itself and see what I've done to simply decorate the front. I've got some ephemera here, the boots, and then I've got the flowers and the leaves separately. So this little butterfly is also separate. And I do recommend when you're decorating your cover that you keep in mind where the elements will go in relation to the strap on here, so that you don't put something where that strap is going to be constantly knocking into it. And that's all you need to do and you're ready to go. Now I've also added some mermaid sparklets on here to give the idea of raindrops. And of course on the inside you can do whatever you would like. So I've just added some Rub Ons and some Dazzles on here. But again, these pages are so nice and sturdy that you can really do a lot of different techniques. So a big land of opportunity inside this journal. Lots that you can do in here. And of course, the back is securely held with those grommets so that you keep your elastic binding on here. Super simple to do and a lot of fun as well. Okay, so I've got one more project that I want to show you, and that's going to feature some of the techniques we've looked at, plus a few more. So I'm going to grab some supplies and let's take a look. I thought we could put together a card together for our final project for today's webisode. So I'm starting out with a white pre-folded card base from Hot Off the Press, and this measures 5 by 6.5 inches. And I'm going to add on top a piece of this beautiful pattern paper. Now I've trimmed this down slightly smaller than the front of my card, and I really like this technique because I think it creates a nice frame around your card focal. It also allows some of that white to sort of brighten up the rest of your design, just color-wise. Now what's nice about this pattern paper is you can kind of go some different directions with it. Sort of depends on if you want it vertically or horizontally. So you can play with the dimensions of that. And I have inked around the outside edge of this using that coffee ink pad. So I'm going to place this here. And then we're going to start looking at some of our ephemera elements. Now, I wanted to use some of the larger images, and I found two that I really like. I thought the hot air balloon was a lot of fun, and I also, of course, as a tea drinker, love this stack of teacups. And what you can very easily do is pop this down, add a dazzle or some other embellishments on here, small ones, and you are ready to go. I wanted to add a little bit more on here, so I thought I would maybe create some different layers on here. So another thing that I did is I took that postmark stencil and the coffee ink pad and blended through the stencil like we saw before, using that ink just right onto some pattern paper. So I'm able to get the dimension of the stencil and the detail of that stencil, I love it, as well as that beautiful pattern paper in the background. So I thought, okay, I'll ink around the outside edges and then position this on here. But then as I was playing around, I thought, okay, this is maybe a little bit too much. Maybe it's too high contrast. So I thought, well, why don't I work in a bit of vellum? Vellum always does a nice job of slightly muting back a design while still allowing you to get some of that color and faux texture through here in that pattern and design that we all want. So what I thought I'd do is pop a piece of that plain vellum on top. So here it is without, here it is with, and then see what my ephemera pieces look like when I put them on top. So I like this a lot. And then there are my teacups too, so I can kind of decide from there. Now when I'm gluing everything together, what I would do is first glue my ephemera element to my vellum, and then lift this off, add most of my adhesive back here, and then secure it onto the pattern paper. That way you don't have a lot of glue showing through here, and I do recommend a glue stick for this. So in this case, what I thought I'd do, okay, I've got this going here. Maybe then I'll take some of the floral ephemera with those little leaves and add something on here like so. And then I thought, ooh, maybe what about a little butterfly rub-on? Now here's the question that I ask myself. Can you use a rub-on onto vellum? Well, the answer is yes, and I'll show that to you in a second. But I thought that was a really great way to, again, add to the depth and dimension. So here's option number one. I've got my teacup and my flowers. Or I can do the hot air balloon, which is also great. And take some of these little flowers and pop those there. And again, could add in my rub-on down here. Now, one thing I want to point out is that when I've got these flowers and leaves together, all of these are individual. I've just got them secured together as a one element. And this just makes it easier when I'm laying out my cards to kind of see where I want things to go rather than fiddling around with lots of small pieces. Okay, so let's take a look at using rub-ons on vellum. I'm going to grab a piece of vellum here, and I've got this little butterfly, so let's take a look. Again, I'm just going to peel this off gently and position this down. Now, one thing, if you've worked with vellum before, you know it's not really fragile, but it does maintain creases. So you do want to be a little bit careful when you're adding your rub-ons on here. So with my bone folder, for example, I'm only going to use the edge of this, not the tip of it. So you don't want to come in with a really pointy tip, but gently come on and burnish this. And so I burnished it pretty well with my finger to start, and that's going to make this come off a little bit more easily. So gently, gently, and then as before, you kind of slowly lift this up. Ooh, I can see I've got a little piece that needs to come back. And slowly come around, and there we go. So I love this effect, and I think this is just a really fun way to add, again, another little bit of dimension onto your cards, whether you go with that hot air balloon or the teacups. So once I get all of this assembled, I will make sure that it's in the project gallery and you can see. Maybe I'll put in both options so that we can take a look. Okay, so I'm going to move aside these things because I want to show you the inside of my card too, which I've already decorated. And here I've got a piece of pattern paper with a border of that glitter sheet. So I think you can see that glittering on there. I've got some ephemera flowers up here, and I've also got some rub-ons on the glitter sheet. And that was another question I had to ask myself, was whether that was possible to add a rub-on onto the glitter sheet. And of course the answer is yes, which is fantastic. So let me show you that. I've got my glitter sheet here. I'm going to just take this little bit of foliage and again place it down. Now the glitter sheet is a little bit sturdier or hardier than the vellum, so you don't have to be quite as careful, but still. And I'm just going to burnish this down. Now you can do this before you peel off the glitter sheet and add it onto another surface, or after. I think I would recommend after, so you know exactly where it's going to go. And then gently walk this back, and then there you go. So whether you're adding your rub-ons onto a glitter sheet or onto a vellum, you've got lots of nice options there. And again, I'll make sure that everybody can see the card that I finished off when I was deciding which elements to put together. But that is our last project for the day today. And a big thank you to our friends at Stamperia for all of these fantastic supplies. I really had a blast. And a special thanks to you for joining me today. We're really glad that you're here, and we're happy that you're a part of the Paper Wishes family. Please feel free to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. Each item can be purchased separately, and you can see them below. However, we've also bundled them into a creative money saver just for you. For the money saver, just see this webisode on paperwishes.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, just have a look in the description box below this video. You'll find a link that will take you to our Paper Wishes webisodes page, and you can see everything I just mentioned. If you enjoyed our video today, we'd really appreciate a thumbs up. It helps people to find our channel. And don't forget to subscribe. We create 3 to 5 videos each week, so there's always something fun to inspire your creative spirit.